everybody. This is Dave Uncleist.
And Joyce Riley.
We all know knowledge is power, and that's why we call this the Power Hour. The opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of the staff, management, or sponsors of this radio station. And it's a sad fact that sooner or later, those folks that do not necessarily agree might open up their eyes, stand up collectively, and scream at the top of their lungs.
We're in a lot of trouble!
Yeah, you darn betcha. All right, here we go. Hour number 2 of today's Monday installment of the Power Hour is now officially in session. This is Dave.
And Joyce, and I thank you for joining us in the Power Hour, and I thank you for taking the time to care and to look outside your own little section of the world to find out what's happening, because it's kind of startling when you see that what they want you to believe on television is not what really is. Well, joining us today is Bob Chapman, because he helps us understand what really is the financial situation. And as we were talking earlier about the Baltic Dry Index, which has decreased about 93%, and I want to thank Maureen, Nancy, and Lynn for some of the research they did on this. And also this new possible price of gold that Merrill Lynch, Chief Investment Officer, is recommending. So I want to say thank you very much to Bob Chapman for joining us on the International Forecaster newsletter. He is the writer for this. And if you have not gotten a copy of it, you can get a complimentary copy to find out if it's something that you don't think you need every week in your home. It'll come to you by email, or they do a snail mail copy, theinternationalforecaster.com. Thank you, Bob, for joining us in the Power Hour today. Do we have Bob? Looks like he went back to sleep, huh? It's real early where he is. Hope he didn't. Well, we'll try to get him back. In talking about this Baltic Dry Index, I think it's more frightening and more disconcerting than probably we're even giving it the attention. If there is anything that you need, and one of those items ought to be the pet foods for all of your animals, no matter what kind of animals you have. Get the food for you, the food for your animals, and then start getting involved in doing the kind of things that you maybe have never done before. What about putting in an orchard? What about putting in berries? What about just stretching yourself to the things you've never done before? We've got Bob Chapman back, and I say thank you for joining us today on the Power Hour, Bob.
Well, you're welcome, Joyce. I'm sorry. Sometimes we have these little glitches, but fortunately I was able to go around it.
No problem. I thank you for joining us. And we were talking earlier, a lot of information circulating recently about the Baltic Dry Index and the fact that the shipping is down about 93%. That seems pretty scary. Is it as bad as we are hearing, Bob?
Well, if you were into it the way I am, you'd know that it's not good, but the cause of it is not the lack of trade. The cause of it is that 98% of the commodities that are shipped on those ships are done with what is called a letter of credit. And the letter of credit is issued by a bank. And the banks have cut back lending. So the result of the fall in the Baltic Dry Index is really because the banks aren't lending. So what the banks are doing is exacerbating the very difficult situation in the production world. Of course, industrial production is falling everywhere. Just in Japan in the last 3 months, it's fallen 28%, which is unheard of. That's far worse than what happened during the Depression, and in Germany and other countries. So international trade, Baltic Dry Index, is the victim of banks who refuse to lend.
So it's not so much the fact that there's not the goods to be transferred, it's the people that don't want to transfer it and then find out that there's no money to pay them for those items.
That's right. Let's say that you're a pipe manufacturer and you're in Germany, and they don't produce copper there. And so you make a contract to send a large ship full of copper over to Germany from, let's say, Australia. And so you go to your bank, which might be Barclays Barclays and say, look, I want a letter of credit for $832 million for this shipment. And normally they say fine because they deal with them all the time. And then Barclays would take and present the letter of credit to, let's say, Deutsche Bank on the other side, which represents some German manufacturer. And that's how the whole transaction is made. And when the delivery is freight on board, and when the delivery comes to, say, Bremerhaven, then the money is released to the Australian counterparts that actually sent the goods. But if there's no letters of credit, and that's what the problem is, nothing can happen.
Now, is the TARP going to help out this situation? TARP 2, that is.
We don't know the details. We won't know till tomorrow. The answer is probably yes. Banks are being forced to lend. Even though some of the banks are part of the Fed system, most of the banks that are part of the Fed system are in serious trouble. In fact, some of them are bankrupt. And so I think that you will see loosening among the secondary groups of banks. That's where the pressure will be applied. And I think what the government will say, along with the Fed, is that we'll guarantee your action, so to speak, and just go ahead and do it.
Let's talk about the status of TARP 2 right now, because TARP 1 was a miserable failure. I don't think anyone saw that as being any kind of a positive thing for this country to have done. It lined the pockets of some people. At least that's my contention. But TARP 2 now that we've got on the vote up, and then, by the way, the Senate did come in on the weekend, which is very unusual for them. But it didn't seem that anything really transpired there that was positive for the passing of it. But where do we stand on this TARP? What's it for? And what are we really looking at doing here with this $900 trillion?
Well, the second half of the TARP is $350 billion.
Sorry, I mean billion. Apologize.
Yeah, and the banks wanted all the money. And so the Democrats came in power and said, no, we got politics involved here, and you guys won't tell us who's getting the money. I mean, what do you expect? We're not going to give you the money again. And so I think the amount of money that is going to go to the banking community out at top will be cut down immeasurably. And I think you'll see things like, well, we're going to guarantee the insurance on municipal bonds so they can start trading again. Because they were relatively frozen. And maybe they'll be guaranteeing more mortgages through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and FHA. We won't know until tomorrow, but I think we're going to see more of those kinds of things where you can identify where the money went to. As far as the stimulus package is concerned, it's really up in the air, and that's why I've been watching the market since 3 o'clock this morning. And that's why the Dow is weak this morning. It hasn't opened, but the pre-opening showed it down 54 points, with S&P down the equivalent of 80, the Nikkei down 108, and the FTSE down 48. These are equivalent. So what the market is saying is, gee, if this stimulus package doesn't come through, we don't know where the bottom in the market is. So it's very important to the market that some deal is done. And if no deal is done, the market's going to go lower and interest rates are going to go higher.
Now, help me understand, why would the stimulus package help them determine where the bottom of the market is?
Well, it's because it's the feeling on Wall Street. Wall Street doesn't care about anything except the market going up. They don't care what happens to the economy, the American people, socially or politically. They just want to make money. And you have to live there like I did for so long to understand this way of thinking. It's like the old song, anything goes. And so they're saying, hey, we don't care how much you're going to print money and create treasuries that have no backing. We just want it. And if we don't want it, we're not going to buy. We're going to sell.
So it's a psychological issue then?
Yeah, and in great part it is. And, they haven't thought beyond the fact that $822 billion, whatever it is, that they're going to decide on, if they do, is not going to solve the problem. But they don't care about that. They just want to see that number go up and all of that money that doesn't exist being created, and then that money going forward and going into the economy, and that would justify the Dow rallying from 8,000 to 8,500. And they're saying, hey, Washington, if the deal doesn't come, we're stepping aside. You're going to test the lows, and you'll probably go to 6,500 or something.
Oh, my goodness.